Pastor Vernon Bell, who is the pastor of the Shiloh Baptist Church. And we thank him for taking time out of his busy schedule and away from the church that he serves tonight to come and help us in this most important discussion of grief and loss. For all of us at some point walk that road. And from a personal testimony, as I'm sure you will attest, sometimes the walking gets very difficult and we don't really handle it very well. But Pastor Bell is going to come to us at this time, and let us just greet him by saying amen.
Thank you, Pastor Potter. No, sir. I'll stay put. Pastor, give me the outline. Tell me, this discussion is what, 30 minutes? and then question and answer? Well, amen. I don't know that I prepared for an hour, but amen. I just want to say thank you, Pastor Potter, and whoever, all the committee that came up with my name. I thank you for trusting that I would say something that's beneficial to us on this evening. My sister laughed at me when I told her that I would be speaking tonight. We would talk about grief. And she said to me, "Boy, don't let me find out you laid out on the floor kicking and screaming over there." I said, "I promise I'm not going to fall out on the floor and going to be kicking and screaming." This subject, grief, she knows how emotional of a man I am. So she just knew in such a recent loss of my mother and my sister that this would be complicated to me, for me. And I want to say that God is giving me grace and understanding in the absence of my mother. My mother died May of last year. And my sister died about 2 months, 3 months after she did. And so it was a challenge it was really, really a challenge for us. I've been reading this book. It's called Grief Recovery Handbook. Now, I'm not selling a book, but some of the information that I'm going to share with us tonight comes directly from this, the Grief Recovery Handbook. And John James and Russell Friedman are the authors for this particular book. Let me tell you the things that have been helpful to me, things that I've learned from my mother that has helped me to be strong and to come to this place in this grief walk. And I was, while I was reading the book, I was marking down all kind of things that came to my mind. But these things came, and these are things that Mama taught us about grief and loss. Mama always faced death, never minimizing it. She used a specific language when we were talking about the person who had died. So often we want to kind of soften it up with some folk. Well, this person is going to meet the king, or she has passed on, or he has passed on. And I think that kind of has its place, but sometimes you just have to say such a such or so-and-so, Reverend this or Reverend that, have died. Especially when we're dealing with our younger people, because, to say that they are up with Jesus kind of gives them a different idea, and they don't know how to process this whole idea about death and dying, especially when we give them this flowery, and we don't want to talk about hell either, but we want to give them the reality of what this is. He or she has died. That's one thing that Mama taught us, and we learned that growing up. We were never separated from our dead. She always had us there present. We understood. Well, we didn't understand about all the stuff, but we knew that they wasn't coming back. We knew that they were what older people call dead. Mama cried for her parents and her children when she lost her children. And this idea that Mama cried publicly and Mama cried privately, sometimes we get this misunderstanding about being strong for people. So you got to be strong. I'm going to cover a little bit of that a little later. You got to be strong now. You got to be strong and suck it up. And so we don't show people how to deal with death or how to emote or have emotions publicly, because we kind of want everybody just to be strong and get through it. But Mama taught us how to cry, and she taught us that when her parents died and even when her children died. Mama kept her parents and my daddy and those who had died before us alive for us. Even though we understood that they were dead and there was a place in the graveyard for them, she helped us to keep their memory alive. And she did that by engaging us in conversation. And even now, I quote my grandmother or my grandfather. My grandfather had new words. He would make up a word. Or my grandmother, one of her words, well, she would say, if we were asking her to do something that she thought was impossible, and she just wanted to give us an answer, and we would say, Mommy, when are you going to do that? She'd say, well, the 1st of Juvember. So we laugh about the 1st of Juvember. My grandfather, when he was going home, there was a bayou that ran behind our house, and he would go fishing there. And when he was going home, he would say to my mother, going in, going in, going in, going in. And that's all we heard when we were kids, going in, going in, going in. It was one word, going in, going in. But when we grew up, I understood later, it was him saying, going in, going in. And so we laughed about those things, and how my grandmother in her late years got on this motorcycle with this man, and your grandmama riding a motorcycle? She kept them alive for us. And so the grief process, it was easier for us to deal with our loss because we were constantly talking about them, constantly remembering the good that they had done. The most valuable lesson I think that my mother taught us when she was dealing with her parents was that our best friends in years to come, or years when the parents and grandparents were gone, our best friend would be the fact that every opportunity that we had, we were there to do something for them. We didn't miss an opportunity to go home, to be with Mama, to be with my grandparents. And as I mourned the loss of my grandparents, I realized that I was there as often as I could be. School, breaks, I got there. We got there. We helped her to take care. We saw her take care of her parents, our grandparents. And when that time came, we did for her exactly what she had modeled for us with the care for her parents. And today, even though I get sad sometimes, that is such a consolation to us that we did for her what she taught us to do for her parents. She wanted to be home. She didn't want to be in the nursing facility. And God granted that. So we brought her home. She was comfortable to be home. And then Mama taught us one other thing, that we would go the last mile of the way. Go the last mile of the way. And for Mama and us, that's translated as however far you can go with that person. Before death and even after, the undertakers had to put us out. We were gone. If they had, now this might be morbid to some, but if they had allowed me and my brothers and sisters in the embalming room, we would have been right there. We would have been, because that's the relationship that we had with Mama. Mama said some things and did some things that kind of made her passing a little bit easier for us. Difficult, floored, yes, all of that. But she said some things during this process of dying. She would have these visions where she would go in and out, not of consciousness, but Mama was like she was going into heaven or to the next world, and then she would come back. And when she came back, Pastor Potter, she would tell us what she experienced on the other side. And she would go to sleep, and we would say things like, well, Mama, you slept kind of long, boy. I was on that old ship of Zion. One time, Mama slipped away, and she came back, and she was telling us about the crystal sea and getting her healings and all of this. These were conversations that she was having just prior to her death, and we did not interrupt that. And I got to say the importance of that, because you know what we want to do? When our loved ones start talking about death and dying, we shush them. Oh, now, Mama, we're not going to talk like that. We're not going to have that death talking here. And then when the people leave us, you don't know what to do. Don't know how to do it. Can't deal with it. Because they were trying to help us along, and we shut them down. But we allowed Mama to talk. And Mama said this one thing to us one time. She said, one of these trips that she had, she came back and she said, it's y'all's time, right out of Ecclesiastes. All right, Mama, it's our time. What do you mean? It's our time. It's y'all's time, and y'all gonna be crying. Y'all gonna be crying. And we listened to her. And after she finished telling us about our sadness and how we were gonna be in this, it was our time for that, my sister said, well, Mama, because she had gone into this other existence, my sister said, Mama, if we gonna be crying on this side, what are you gonna be doing on the other side? Because the idea is we're on this side and she's on the other side in the presence of God, you know, doing whatever they're doing in the presence of God. And Mama said to my sister, she said, well, I'm going to be crying too. Well, Pastor Potter, it almost didn't make sense that you're going to be in the presence of God, but you going to be crying too. Why you crying, Mama? I'm crying because y'all crying. Oh.
Might help you out a little bit.
All right.
It's all right.
Okay. Mama said, I'm crying because y'all crying. And it almost, for a little while, just a second, almost didn't make sense, because here you are, and she's telling us that she's in the presence of God. And then she says, well, I'm crying too because y'all crying. And then it began to make sense to me what John said in Revelation. John wrote Revelation. John said in Revelation, he quotes this, he says something where Jesus says, and he will wipe every tear from their eyes. I'm like, oh, Lord, this is really, really something that we are experiencing here with Mama. And Mama fell asleep on about a Monday night. I say fell asleep because she suffered another stroke in the brainstem, and she fell asleep. And so we had her taken to the doctor, and they told us that, they said to us that they really didn't know why she was still alive, because that was some part, wherever the stroke was, controlled her breathing and everything. And so they said to us, they said she can go anytime now, because at some point the brain is not going to get the communication to breathe, and she will breathe away. And so we had to make decisions whether to put her on the respirator, ventilator, and not. And that was a tough decision, but Mama made it easy for us. And Mama made it easy for us because Mama said, I don't want to be on none of them machines. And so with tears in our eyes, we said to the doctor, no, we can't do that. We won't do that. She really did make the decision easy for us. And so we brought her home that Thursday. They told her hospice came along, and they was giving us, they said, well, she probably not going to make it through the night. And so she was with us that Thursday night and Friday. And then she was with us all day Friday and into Saturday. And all day Saturday she was there, and I was there with them on Saturday evening. My nieces, we were all gathered there cutting up the way we would normally do, and she was running a fever. And of course she wasn't alert, but she was, we knew that she could probably still hear us. But she was running a fever. And at that moment, I said, Mama's probably going to leave about the time she goes to church in the morning, Saturday night. Well, in Louisiana, church started at 7 o'clock in the morning. So I started to tell my brothers and sisters that Mama's probably going to leave us at about 7 o'clock in the morning. That's what I felt in my gut. That's what I felt. But then they were having such a good time in the room, cutting up and carrying on, and so I let it go. And then another time, same hour, I felt that impression again to tell them. But they were having so much fun, and I didn't say nothing. Well, that Saturday night, I went to my mother's house, and it was about a 40-minute drive from where she was at my sister's house. 7 o'clock, 6:30 in the morning, I looked at the clock and I said, well, I'm not going to church this morning. I was in Louisiana. It was going to be my first time. I didn't have to go to church, so I said, I'm not going to go to church this morning. And so about 7:30, my phone rang, and it was my sister, and she said, Mama's gone. Mama's gone. And I'm like, man. And it was just really weird. Now, I don't know how long I had grieved my mother's passing before she passed. But grief had begun to set in, because what happened was things began to change. And one of the definitions for grief is that said that grief is normal and natural. It's a normal and natural reaction to the loss of any kind. And so most of us, when we think about grief, we think about somebody died, but the loss of any kind. So when we talk about grieving people, we're not just talking about people grieving because they've lost someone. People grieve because of a breakup. One person decides to move on in the relationship, and the other one is not ready for that person to move on. There's a loss, so there's grief and there's grieving. Death of a pet can cause grief. Moving can cause grief. Starting school, divorce, marriage can cause grief, cause people to grieve. Well, what are you thinking? People grieving when they get married? Yeah, the death of a previous life and lifestyle, the way you used to do stuff. That when I first got married, I was a bachelor to my heart. And then I was married. And we had our first argument. And Pastor Paula, she ain't leave. She was still there. I'm like, what? And I had to apologize to my wife after I did what is called the grief chart. A grief chart, a grief and loss chart. It starts, you do this exercise, and it starts when you were born, and then you go to the first time that you've had a loss or suffered a loss. And then from there, you mark all the losses up until the time that you are, up until the present. And what I learned was, my daddy died in 1992. June of 92. Daddy died June of 92. I got married July of 92. So I had to go, and I'm just finding this out now. The first couple of years of my marriage didn't go so well because I was suffering from the loss of a parent. So I had to apologize to my wife for those first couple of years that things were extremely rocky for us, for us. But it was because I didn't know how to deal with grief. I hadn't processed this thing just yet. But health changes could cause people to grieve. A certain diagnosis could cause folk to grieve. Empty nest. Our son has left for college, and it's just my wife and I there. An empty nest causes folk to grieve. Legal problems, holidays, finances, retirement, graduation. All those things causes grief in folks' life. And the one thing that one guy said, there's two things that's sure in life: death and taxes. Y'all heard that? But we need to add a third one to that, because if you're alive, there's grief. Death, taxes, and grief. Grief also is the conflict of your feelings. You have this conflict of feelings. And it's a conflict because on one hand, you might be glad that a person isn't suffering anymore. Mama's not suffering, daddy's not suffering, whomever is not suffering. So on one part, Pastor, you're feeling good that they're no longer suffering. On the other side of that, they're gone. And you can't touch them. You can't call them. I remember the first time I was on my way to work and the sun was coming up, and it was on those beautiful mornings like that, I would call my mama, "Girl, what you doing?" And I started dialing the phone, and all of a sudden I realized that nobody was going to be on the other end of the phone. And I was just overtaken with grief. But there's a conflict. Grief brings about this conflict. This conflict of I'm happy, yet I'm sad. This sense of relief, but then I can't see and touch and talk to this person anymore. Grief is about broken heart. It's not about a broken brain. It's about a broken heart. When Mama died, there were well-meaning people who said all kinds of wonderfully stupid things to me. But they were truthful things intellectual. But my grief wasn't about my intellect. My grief was the fact that I loved, and he or she, this case is my mother, she whom I loved was no longer there. And so, and my heart knows that I love. She wasn't there anymore. And sometimes you can't stage that. The heart will grieve when it wants to grieve. You be riding down thinking everything's good, and then the tears will flow because your heart misses whom it misses. And so there's a lot of things that we say during those times. God don't make no mistakes, baby. And I was very kind. God don't make no mistakes, baby. God don't make no mistakes. And I know some of us don't, raise your hand. I know God don't make no mistakes. My argument wasn't even God with God making no mistake. Well, you know, and there's the list goes on and on about the nice things that people were trying to say to lend comfort to me. But I didn't have no issue with God. You can't question God. You can't question God. And I'm like, yes, ma'am. I know I can't question God because God is always right. He knew what he was doing. Yes, ma'am. I knew God knows what he was doing. But that's not what I'm dealing with. That's not why I'm crying. That's not why I'm grieving. I'm grieving because my heart misses she who it loves. And as soon as we could understand the fact that folk need to grieve and help them to grieve, the better off we all are going to be as we help those. One other thing. Baby, I know exactly what you're going through because my mama died just... How on earth can you know what I'm going through because you really don't know the relationship that I had with my own mother? At best, y'all, what we can say to people is, I remember what I experienced when my mama died or when my so-and-so died. But to tell somebody that you know exactly what they're feeling, you don't. We don't. We don't. There was a young man whose auntie, two young men. One young man, I had to give the call to tell him that his mother had passed. And I just knew, Pastor, that the young man was going to throw a fit and tear up my office. I got to tell him that his mama's dead. I said, I just got this phone call. Is your mother named such and such? Yes, sir. We got a phone call and said that she has died. And he said, oh. And he said some other stuff. And he was gone. And I'm like, oh my God. But we were talking about his mama. But his relationship with his mama wasn't the relationship that I had with my mama. Another young man, same day, told him that his auntie had died. I thought this was surely going to be an easy one. I said, I got his call and said, Betsy, is that your auntie? Yeah, that's my auntie. I said, Miss Betsy has passed. She has died. And he stood up and passed out on the floor, screaming, kicking, and hollering, and carrying on up in there. The one man whose mama died couldn't give a care. But this man whose auntie died, he was undone. And how could that be? The auntie raised him like he was her own child. So that was mother to him. So we don't know what these relationships, and I don't know what you're experiencing, and we have to stop telling people, I know what you're going through. Because unless you are there, my brothers and sisters are probably the only ones who really know how great my loss is for mama. Because we had the same mama, because mama didn't have favorites, because mama did for one, she did for everybody. She did for us all. So they would probably be the closest in the earth who know what loss that I suffered, that we were suffering. And I got to tell y'all this, and I'm gonna say this. The healing, and I'm learning this, and Mama's been gone now since May, but what I'm learning is the healing that I needed, that I so desperately need in the absence of my mama. Guess where it's coming from? My brothers and sisters. Because I look at them and I see mama's eyes, I see mama's mouth, I see mama's hair, I see mama's smile. I look at them and I listen to them and I hear mama's voice and we laugh about the things that we all used to laugh together. My healing is tied into my brothers and my sisters. And I want us to know that. I want us to say that because you know the thing that Satan attacks the first and the hardest when death occurs is your relationships. Your relationships between your siblings and then first cousins and nieces, the relationships. And so the healing that we need when it comes to grief, sometimes I'm finding out, are right there in the very arms, relationships of the people that were raised up with us, with me. So grief is emotional. When mama died, I had no energy, no strength. I was drained. It was kind of crazy, but I decided that I was going to go through it because good-meaning people want to try to help you pass certain things. I decided that whatever it was that I needed to experience, that I would experience. And that's kind of what I've been doing. And that's how I'm able to come up with some of the stuff that I'm sharing with us now. There's a lady, her name is Dr. Elizabeth Kubler-Ross. And she's important because what she came up with was 5 emotional stages that a dying person may go through after a terminal diagnosis. Y'all know the 5 stages? Okay. Here are those 5 stages that a person goes through when they have a terminal diagnosis. 5 stages. Denial, anger, bargaining, depression, and then acceptance. Denial, anger, bargaining, depression, and acceptance. And she did a really good job explaining those. But the problem with that is most professionals have taken those 5 stages and tried to apply them to other areas. In this case, several have tried to apply those stages to grief. You know, the 5 stages of grief, and they'll go listing off this list. But what I've learned and what I'm continuing to learn is that there are no stages to grief and grief recovery. Let's think about it. I get a phone call and they say, Reverend, my whosoever has died. And if that's what they say to me, where is denial in that? That's really fact. There's no denial there. Anger was the second one. Everybody's not angry and frustrated when their loved one died. When mama died, I wasn't mad at nobody. Wasn't frustrated at nobody, didn't kick no cats, didn't kick no dogs. But if I apply these stages to grief, then it's a wonder that we kind of get messed up. Denial, anger. Some people, and I said, I was all right with mama's passing because we understood what she shared with us. Not that in the next life, in this other existence, we got that. So I wasn't angry about that. And then the third stage if you look at the stages of how to deal with a terminal diagnosis, the third stage is bargaining. You know, that person who's been given that diagnosis, they want to reason with God. Well, if you heal me, I'll do this and I'll do that and I'll run all the way for you and I'll do all these wonderful things. But when somebody dies and when there's grief, what bargaining is there? I was the chaplain at the Hillcrest Hospital. I was in training, and I was working in the emergency room on that evening. And this guy had just died. They called in the chaplain, and I went in there. And the brother of the deceased was sitting there with him, and I offered prayer. And the man said to me, "No, don't pray for me. Pray for my brother." Well, my training is the dead is dead. I need to be praying for you to help you process this whole thing. He said, "Don't pray for me. I don't need prayer. Pray for my brother." And I'm like, "Lord, how do I do this?" Father, in Jesus' name. And I offered prayer for the deceased brother who was probably already in the presence of God. The Holy Spirit allowed me to do that because that's what the brother needed, even though I thought that he needed something else. So this whole sense of bargaining, when you're dealing with the 5 stages of a terminal ill person, there's no bargaining if you make those apply to grief. What are you bargaining for? The person is already have already moved on. You know, depression, you can get a little bit of depression in there, and acceptance. I'd already accepted the fact that mama was gone. So we are taking those 5 stages and applying it something where it was never designed to be applied. So, are there stages to grief? This author says there are not. There are no stages to the emotions that arise after a loss. But there are common responses. And these common responses are the reduction or a loss of concentration. Listen, when mama died, and I do it now, mama been gone for a while, but I know some of y'all do. But wait, I'll get up thinking I'm going to the kitchen to get something. By the time I got to the kitchen, I didn't know what I got up to go get. Which is ain't nobody got to die for that. But there's a loss of concentration. I wasn't trying to pay attention to a whole lot of stuff. There's a loss of concentration. That's a common response. A sense of numbness. The sense of numbness is both physical and emotional. It could be both. Just numb. Just nothing affects you. You're walking around in a daze, kind of like numbness. Disruption of a sleep pattern. These are common responses to grief. Disruption of sleep patterns. You can sleep too much, or you can not sleep enough, or both. The change in eating habits. You eat too much. I gained 21 pounds after mama died. Y'all can't tell it, right? 21 pounds after mama died. And I'm down 8 now, so I'm trying to get back to where I was. And then there's the roller coaster of emotional energy. Emotionally, I was all over the place. All over the place. I cry for everything. The baby's born, I cry. Son graduation, I cry. Baby got healed from a cold, I cry. I was just everywhere. I was crying almost about everything. I was crying. But that was a part of what was going on in my life at this time. And I'm so much better now. And I know I'm better because, and I'm not trying to get over my mother's. I'm not trying to forget her. I'm not trying none of those things. But I was on a phone conversation with a young man who really didn't know my mother, but he knew my love for my mother, and he didn't know Mama had passed. And he said, and by the way, Chaplain, how's your mama? And I said, Mama died in May. Oh, Chap, I'm so sorry to hear that. I'm like, it's good. It's okay. It's okay. And we talked and we laughed and we talked and laughed a little bit more. But for some people who have not processed this grief and this grieving process, to bring up the name of the deceased could cause immediate crisis, send you into crisis mode. But it's been a process. What else? Denial. There's recovery. And we'll get into recovery a little bit later. But there is a recovery. And recovery pretty much just means that I'm able to function in this new norm now. I'm able to kind of move on, and I'm feeling better. I'm learning to live with this new normal that I have. And it's a process. It's a process. You don't get there immediately. And I'm thinking I probably gotten there too soon, because you can't put I guess you can't get there too soon, but compared to some other folk, I'm doing all right. I'm doing pretty good with this whole idea of loss and grief. Pastor, what time? I can. Am I good? Okay. There's some things that are taught to us, and some of us learn these things from the time that we're a child. We know how to get stuff. We learn how to get and to hold on to things. We can acquire a whole lot of stuff, but what we haven't learned is how to deal with loss. And these are just 5 things I want to share, six things I want to share with us. The misinformation that we have when dealing with loss. There was an example that was given of a little boy who had his dog died. And of course the parents tried to fix it up, keep it moving, but the little boy cried and cried and cried, and they were saying, it's gonna be all right, don't cry. One thing that he learned from that, they were telling him, don't feel bad about it. And he cried and he cried, and when we see people crying today, we try to tell them it's gonna be all right. But early on, some kind of way we learned this idea, this thought that we're not supposed to feel bad about this. And so what the parents did was, he cried so much, they said to him, well, if you stop crying, then on Saturday, we're going to take you and get you another dog. And he did stop crying. And on Saturday, they took him and got him another dog. So the first lesson that they learned, that he said that he learned, was that I'm not supposed to feel bad about loss, because you telling me, don't cry. Don't cry. The second lesson he learned was that I could replace my loss. After a little while, I'll replace this loss. I'll get a new dog. And he did. He got a new dog and he quit crying. But he also said that I couldn't tell my parents that I didn't love this dog because I wanted my dog. But those are the kind of lessons that we learn as we're growing up. We kind of have misinformation when it comes to dealing with loss. And then one time he said that he cried so much, they said, if you're going to cry, go into your room. And what's the lesson he learned from that? You got to grieve alone. And don't many of us do that? Because we're taught, and I'm getting ahead of myself, we're taught, you got to be strong be strong for your sister, be strong for this one. So if you're going to fall apart, you got to go hide yourself and fall apart. Grieve all by yourself. These are lessons, misinformation that we've been taught all of our lives. Got to isolate yourself. And here's one that we tell people, we teach. Time will heal all wounds. In other words, just give it some time. Just give it some time. You know, and tell that to somebody who's grieving because they went through a divorce. Well, just give it some time. There are more fish in the sea. You can find yourself somebody else. Or to the parents that have lost a child. We said, you done lost your baby. And some well-meaning person said, but you can get another one. Y'all try again. Oh, that's all right. Y'all could try again. Well, what about this one? Some of the things that we say to folk who are really grieving and really hurting. And sometimes we say stuff that add to their grief and pain. But the other one, and I just mentioned it, but be strong. You got to be strong. I told my deacons that had come down, and several of the members from the church had come down, and I stood and told my brothers and sisters at my mama's funeral. I said, now if I lay out on this floor, y'all leave me alone. Y'all give my mama her due. Because you know people get to crying and carrying on, and then we want to shh. We got to be strong for them. What does that mean? How do you be strong for me? How do you do that? Nobody's explained what it means to be strong for somebody else, because what it turns into is, if you're going to fall apart, you go out on the other side in your room by yourself, isolate yourself, and then fall apart. Now, how is that helping you grieve? So these are misinformation that we learn as we are growing and dealing with grief and grieving folk, people who are grieving. And the last one that I want to share with us tonight is, you got to stay busy. Get right on back to work. Go on back to work. Hurry up and get this done and busy yourself. Busy yourself. Stay busy so you won't think about it. Cover it up with something to do. The grieving and grief is a natural response to a loss. And the fact that whatever used to be is no more. Whatever that process used to be is no more. So we grieve. And grieving is a process. It's not steps. You don't go through those steps to grief. And grieving could take how long? It might take longer for Reverend than it took for any of the rest of you. But we have to be willing to allow Reverend to be able to grieve and to talk. Talk about the deceased. This young family had lost their father, and I didn't know the man. And they called and asked me if I would do the funeral. And I said, yes, I'll do my best. I said, but I need to talk to y'all because I didn't know your dad. And so I did a meeting with them, Pastor Potter, and he had 3 children, 2 sons and a daughter. And we sat and we laughed, and they talked about their daddy and how their daddy cut up and how he did this. And I was taking all these notes, and we were having a good time as they were talking about their father. So when should grief counseling or grief repair, grief restoration start? The grief process immediately. Get folk to talking. Get them to talk and share. And most people want to talk. Most people want to talk about what it is that person has done and how that person affected their lives and did all these wonderful things. And sometimes we have to just allow those people to do just that. We have to allow people to do just that. And it's a part of helping them in this process of grieving, helping them in the process of grieving. That's all I prepared for tonight because I thought I had a 30-minute lecture, maybe 40 minutes at the most. But, Pastor, question and answer. All right, here's how we're going to do the question and answer part. If I don't know the answer, we got the sage himself in the house. So let's talk about grief and this whole process of grieving. Are there questions, thoughts? And maybe you got something that you want to share that I can add to my next lecture, wherever else we're going to be able to talk about it. Yes, sir. Tell me your name. Mr. Crawford. Mm-hmm.
And that was, I mean, we always talk about as a family that chain never being broken.
Yes.
And then here it is now, we as a family of now instead of 7, we were 6.
Yeah.
And dealing with those, and I really dealing with those emotions that you just ran down through.
Yes, sir.
And not only in November that I lost my brother, in January of that, go through the holiday, and in January, I lost a brother-in-law.
Mm-hmm.
And so here we are, less than 6 months, have lost 2 young men that from our family point of view were brothers.
Yes.
To our sisters. And now we have to deal with some emotions and how we have to work with it and how we have to give both our sister, my sister and my sister-in-law some room, what you suggested, how we need to breathe. And we didn't know because we had lost anyone in our family since our mother. And that's been like 68 or so.
Yeah.
So this is a new real occurrence to us. So I appreciate what you said. All the things that you said, I can look back and look at my sister, and she had a hard time because, I mean, that was her husband was love of her life. And she had to, actually, she decided to do some counseling. I know she might suggest something like that, that she, us black folks, don't really do a lot of counseling. But she did. It meant a whole lot to her, and she told us, you can do what you feel, but I need this because, I have a major glory in my life, and
Yeah.
talking about it, like you said, was a major hit for her. So I just appreciate your presentation and some things that made sense to me and into how our family dealt with that grief in that period of time.
Yes, sir. Thank you. This book, Grief Recovery Handbook, I went to the funeral home director in Veneta. Most of the funeral homes now will, if you use them as a service, they will offer some grief counseling. So I went to the funeral home director and asked him what book he used. And he gave me a copy of the book. And after I had read the first chapter or two, I was going to recommend it to my sister, who's a social worker, and my other sister, who was a school teacher. But I was afraid to, because I'm like, they ain't going to want no grief counseling. But one sister said to me, she said, have you thought about counseling, grief counseling? I said, yeah. By the way, I got this book that I'm reading, and and I heard and called my other sister that Sylvia said that she was going to be doing this, and what I did was I got on Amazon and I bought 5 copies, and I sent them to Louisiana, and I didn't know that my 2 sisters and I are reading the book together, and we're comparing notes. It's been a beautiful thing that we are able to walk through. And the other thing is that Mama really helped us. Mama helped us to get to the place that we were able to talk about it. Now, my sister's death was completely different because she ain't say nothing. She just didn't wake up. She like, I ain't going nowhere. I ain't going to tell y'all I ain't going to say bye. She just didn't wake up that next morning. And I was like, what? And when my niece called me to say, I just want to tell you that my mama has joined her mama. That was how she told me that my sister had died. Like, girl, why are you playing? But it's been a blessing. It's really been a blessing to be able to talk about it and to even talk to y'all tonight about Mama. And I got to tell my sister I wasn't rolling and crying and screaming in the floor. She's not going to believe it because she's wanting videotape. Other thoughts and ideas or questions as it relates to grief and grief recovery. Grief is normal. Grief is normal.
I was very angry because I asked God, why did you take everybody away from me? I'm the last one out of a whole immediate family. And every single day, sometimes thoughts come to me, and I'm riding along and tears are just rolling, but I'm not crying, but they're just rolling and rolling and rolling. But I have learned how to cope with that, with the memories, all of those memories. And that's what keeps me. And like you say, and all my brothers and sisters at Antioch, I still think I got a big family. Amen. And that keeps me living.
Amen. And we need you. Amen. He left you here because we still need you. And you're not finished with doing whatever your assignment was. And I celebrate that my mother and brothers have gone on to be in the presence of God. But I didn't look back and say, well, why are you ain't taking, in the South. In the South, they got these films, I'm coming to you. They go into, anybody videotaping, right? And y'all gonna have me can't go home. In the South, they get to these funerals and they was, Lord, take me. I ain't one time told me, take me. Not one time. And I said I really felt in my heart, and people say this, and this is one of those crazy things that I say sometimes people say to you, and they mean well, but it's just, you want to shut them up. Well, if they wouldn't come back, if you called them, they wouldn't want to come back if they could. I made a mistake in telling my niece that. She said, oh yeah, I'll call her, I'll get her back up, because I don't think my mom was ready to go nowhere, and she went on and on and on. But that's what, well, they wouldn't come back if they had a chance to. I don't know, but I wouldn't want my mother to go through what she went through, knowing that she got to die again. When my daddy died, and I thought Mama was going to be lonely, and I said, Mama, you going to marry again? She said, boy, I am not going to put the Lord through that again. I'm not going, she didn't say she was going to, she said, I'm not going to put the Lord through that again. So she was content. And what she did was she really, Mama was one of those who really loved her children. And so when we went home, we were kids, and one of the older brothers was coming home, Clinton coming home. It was like a celebration. Everybody was getting dressed. They were cleaning the house. And I'm like, well, who's Clinton? Clinton was my oldest brother. Who's Clinton? It's like Santa Claus or something. Who is Clinton? But Clinton was coming, so yeah, Clinton's coming. So Mama taught us how to celebrate each other. And so we never threw these elaborate parties and stuff that you see people do, and I celebrate those things. But every time we would get together, it was a celebration. When Mama came to Oklahoma in July, the year before she died, she was in Oklahoma at Shiloh, and they drove all night long. and we had a good time, and Shiloh loved on her, and we got pictures, and it was just wonderful, just absolutely wonderful. Now I don't know why I was going to say where I was going to go with that, but yeah, I miss her, but do I want her to come back? Not to exchange what I understand is going on here for what the scripture says that she has now, and it would really be kind of what word, Reverend? Selfish. That's the right word. Be kind of selfish. It'd be kind of selfish. There was a question here, and then I'm coming over to you. Well, and that's how grief is. It comes and it goes. And so when it's time for me to cry, I know how to cry. I'll be rolling. Listen, I'm driving to work. One time, I said, Lord, did you try to kill me? I had to pull off. I was driving home. Couldn't see. Pull off. But what we've learned, what we've been taught, you got to hold that in. Oh, you got to be strong. You can't do that. No. Cry. And as much as I've cried, I've laughed and talked to my brothers and sisters about some stuff. Mama visits me quite often. And I don't mean that literally, but the last couple of nights ago, I was sitting at my chair, my recliner, and I picked up the hymnal that she bought me. And she wrote in it, I hope you enjoy this as much as I do. And she had these markers in where she had gone through and marked certain songs. When I come to the garden and I was just sitting there, I'm like, girl, listen. And I just started smiling. She's speaking to me even now. And yesterday, I stayed home because they said the weather was going to be bad, and I drive to Bonita, and I convinced myself, which didn't take much, to stay home. And my mother had this way of, every year she would give you this blessed dollar. And she would take this dollar and attach it to something that says, I'm thinking about you, or something like that, 2018. And I ran across $2 blessed dollars that Mama had sent. And I was tickled, so I took a picture of it and I sent them to my sisters and says, Mama's winking at us today. But when the time comes that you need to emote, cry, then cry. But you'll laugh, and I learned to laugh. So it comes and goes. And have I gotten over Mama's death? Probably not. I'm going to tell you why. Because I'm in Oklahoma, and all of them are in Louisiana. And I guarantee by the time it's time for me to go home and I got to drive up to my mama's house and she's not going to turn on the light and come outside and with her red towel, here's what she would do. She'd get her red towel. Don't come in, hold on, don't come in. And she'll come out to the steps and put her red towel down so we can walk on the red carpet. I said, girl, that's the kind of stuff Mama did, you know. So am I over it? Probably until I go home and ain't nobody going to lay no red carpet out for me. Then they might have to roll me a little bit. Yes, sir. Oh, yes, ma'am. I was too far back. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Sudden death? Okay. Mm-hmm. 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 It's an excellent response. You know why? Because there's so much that we don't think about when it comes to presence. Presence. You don't have to say nothing. Be present. Did I tell you all the crazy things they say to me when Mama died? Oh, she's in the presence of Jesus. Oh, she's just singing in the heavenly choir. I don't care nothing about none of that. My mama did. Oh, she wouldn't come back. Well, who cares about that? I'm hurting. I am in pain. I would rather you come and sit with me for 20 minutes and I just know that you're there and you be with me, you're present with me in that moment, than for you to come and say something crazy like, God don't make no mistakes, baby. And I tell you one other one that we say, and I think we mean well when we say it. We do. Well, if you need anything, just call me. I'm hurting, drowning in pain, but how am I going to find the strength to call and say, I need this or I need that? Here's what I say to us. If God puts something on your heart to do, do it. Just do it. Just do it. And I know people mean well when they said, you know why? Because I've said it. Well, if you need anything, you just call me. And we do mean well. But for the person that's grieving, you know, what does that mean? Well, we can't bury him now. We need $4,000. Well, I mean, we don't got it. But you did say anything that we need. For us, when we're dealing with the grief-stricken folk, let us just do. And in our churches, we do. We get dinners and take to the house, and we just do. Some people go over and clean up, and we just do. Just do. So this whole idea that you didn't have anything to say, but you were present, that is worth more than trying to find something that's going to frustrate people to say. And you know how many of us try to find something right to say? Ooh, well, and you know how many people don't go because, well, I don't know what to say to them, so I'm just not going to go. Baby, I'm here. I'm here. I'm here. You could even say, I don't have a clue as what to say, but I'm here. And be present with the grief-stricken people in that moment. The pastors will show up at the house. He's not trying to say a whole lot. We just want to be present with you. There was a hand. Yes, ma'am. Pastor Potter, you're doing good. Yes, ma'am.
And that was a real painful experience for me. And so what I did was, actually, I just couldn't talk about it. And I couldn't help my daughter, so I just would hold her. You know, right now. But anyway, what I did was, I saved a little cap, the baby cap, because I wanted to keep her scent. And I put it in. So every now and then I'd go smell it. But it brings me so much pain. I was thinking, I should throw this away. And I tried to throw it away. And I dug the trash can and got it back. Because I wanted to, this seemed like that's, but, I just wanted to do that. And sometimes I think, I don't think I'm grieving for her. I understand, people say, well, something could have been wrong with, and God, they tell you a lot of stuff. But the thing about it is, I do. I still have a little baby cap, and it's just
How
really.
long has it been?
10 years. 10 years.
And how long should they take to grieve? However long it takes. Now, here's when I was called in to to deal with a family who had a child that was stillborn. I asked the question, how long is a full life? For my mama, it was 89 years. For my mama, it was 89 years. For that precious one, it was however many minutes that he or she lived. and they lived a full life in accordance with what the master said. A full life. And it might not seem like that, but they lived a full life. Gathered people together, lived a full life. So hold on to the cap. Hold on to the cap. Other thoughts? Oh, Lord, Pastor Potter is coming now.
About 6 months ago, I became the only biological grandmother to 2 teen children. It's been very difficult because of them being teenagers, I believe.
It's okay.
But me grieving of that loss, I wonder if I'm being the grandmother I should be, I can be to them. And it bothers me sometimes because I just don't know sometimes what to say.
Mm-hmm. So this was your daughter?
It's my daughter-in-law.
Your daughter-in-law. Okay. Talk to them about their mother as best you can. There's always going to be time for it. Remember, recovery starts when a person dies. We get to have interaction and talk about the positive, the good things that they've done. So it's never going to be too late to tell them who their mother is and that she loved them.
Well, my granddaughter mentioned to me the other day that her mother, her biological grandmother on her mother's side, passed away when her mother was only 13 and she was 13, and it really got so deep until she just ran and hid for a moment. And I would think I can say to her that we don't know the answer to those questions. You know, I don't believe in patterns going from one
Generation to the next. Yeah.
I don't know that. I explained to her that her mother, her other grandmother, had a terminal illness. Is why she passed away. And her mother was entirely different. So
You have to be present in the life of those children. And because you're present in the life of those children, you're the one who can continue to attach them to the mother that they've lost. And so learn to talk about them. And I'm going to tell you what I told y'all not to do. Be strong for them. But they need to see you weep. They need to see you cry. It's all right if you tell them what you need to share with them in tears, because you're not telling them to go somewhere and hide. You're not telling them that they need to be strong. My mother modeled everything that we needed to know. She modeled it for her. And you are the teacher right now. So, and you don't know how long, but you got to make them know that however long that God gives me, I'm here with you and for you. So let's do this. And you got to encourage them in that. And when you need to cry, it's okay to cry. If you need to hold on to them while they cry, it's all right. And if y'all need to cry together, bawl and scream and kick and cry together, when it's over, hug everybody and then keep it moving. And when it's time to cry again, it's okay. It's really all right. Listen, nobody has the best way to grieve. Nobody had this whole pattern thing figured out. So you got to do it the way you feel is best for you and your grandchildren. And I think you're doing a heck of a job. Just the conversation that we've had. Love on them, cry with them. When my brother died, my oldest brother died, I was tore up in the room. And Mama came in that room and fell across that bed with me. I didn't know it at the time, But she was saying, it is all right to cry. It is all right to experience this level of pain. And she helped us to work through that. So cry with them. Cry with them. And it's all right to remind them of how strong their mother was. And it's nobody's fault that she's gone. We can't blame anybody.
I think that's very important, because one thing you have to always be careful for is how the person is processing the grief, because they may not be processing it in a good way. So you have to be careful that they don't do something negative in their process. But when you cry with them, I like the idea of don't try to be strong for them. We all do. But when you cry with them, you're teaching them how to process it.
Absolutely.
And they will hopefully understand how you are doing it, and they do it themselves, and you both make it. But it's nothing wrong with jumping across the bed with the son, grieving the loss of his brother. That helps them to process it, but you got to cry with them. Just cry.
And there's no girl grief, boy grief. Y'all hear what I'm saying? Well, you got to be a big boy and you can't. No. You got to let people grieve. I saw my daddy cry at his mama's funeral, and daddy was something else. I'm like, this Negro crying? Oh, Lord. What? I didn't know what else to do, so I started crying too, because he was crying. But daddy cried. 2 times I saw my daddy cry. 2 times I saw him cry. At his mama's funeral and at his sister's funeral. All the other times, daddy was knocked down, dragged out. But when I saw him cry, and I understood that as a man I could cry. And so that's the lessons, as Pastor said, that's the lessons. Yes. What do you?
And continues to, try to find reasons why he didn't save her mom. And just angry with God.
Pastor Potter? What do you say to a relative who's angry with God? And say that other part again. And try to find a reason why he didn't save her mom. So he's in the grieving process. He's really angry with God. He gave it back to me. God is not frustrated with his or her anger towards him. I think it was the little guy from Texas, a little short guy who sings. Kirk Franklin. You know what Kirk says? God can handle it. God is not upset with him or her for being mad at him because she doesn't understand. You have to just continue to doing the good that you know and speaking the truth that you know until the time that they can come to a realization for themselves. God is not mad about that at all. He can handle it. And maybe that's what you need to tell him. You tell God, because I think for us, we have been saying, you be careful what you say to God. You can't ask God no questions. I had a young man whose baby died, and I was with him as he used profanity towards God. Profanity towards God. But you know what? God was present with him while he was getting through that time in his life. But he had to get that out. And I could have been like, oh, Lord, like we black people do. You don't say that to God. He'll strike you down. I learned that God can handle it. He can handle their grief. He can handle their upset and frustration and even their swears, their profanity towards him. He can handle it. There's a scripture that says he's acquainted with grief and he bore our sorrows and our burdens and he got this. And so you just have to continue doing what you know to do to help and say the things that you know to say. And eventually the seed that you're planted will come to fruition in that child's life. And it might not be the day of tomorrow, but God is faithful. God is faithful. And if you're praying for him or her, then God is true to his word. And you might not see it, but they'll come around. Other thoughts? Reverend, you didn't help me with that one. Oh, Lord. Was that helpful?
You know, I thank God for Antioch because as ministers, Pastor Chambers brought these very things to us. And she let us know that as ministers, you talk too much. She said to us, when there is a death, when there is tragedy, sometimes just go, and as Marla was saying a minute ago, and just be quiet. Mm-hmm. Let them talk, let them cry, don't tell them not to cry. And she made a statement about a young man losing, as you said, his mom. And she said, oh, baby, I'm so sorry. And he said, well, I am too, because I ain't gonna get no more money. You know, and she let us know that people grieve differently mm-hmm. for their parents, their brothers and sisters. So it really helped me because I just lost two brothers within 6 months apart from one another. And it helped out a whole lot to just cry. And I'm honored because I'll tell you, when you tell me not to cry, you shut up. Because I'm going to do what I need to do for me, you know. Because I think that's too much pressure that we hold in and we allow other people to allow this stuff to lay on us, you know. So I thank God for Antioch. We got some good teaching that goes on over here.
Amen. When I came in for prayer, and I was really, really, really blessed by the 10 minutes of quiet that after the initial prayers had been prayed. And then there was this quiet time. And then Reverend came back and she closed it in prayer. Some of us don't know the importance of being quiet, of being still before God, or going and working with people or being with people and not having the exact words to say. It's just a beautiful thing, because while I'm sitting here and the peace of the prayers, and it was just a beautiful experience just sitting here, and you could hear God's voice and you can sense his presence in here, in the quiet, in the stillness. And sometimes we try to busy ourselves, and more so when we're grieving, because we don't want to be alone. We don't want to be by ourselves because our thoughts run crazy. Sometimes you got to get by yourself. Sometimes you got to get to the place and just sit there and be there present with them and don't have the exact words to say. Baby, I don't know what to say, but I'm here. And that's plenty. That is plenty. All right. Pastor Potter, thank you.
Leaders, there's Reverend Williams, Marla, Reggie. Anything you want to say about the next ones that are coming up? First of all, let's celebrate Pastor Bell.
Thank you.
for his presentation this evening, because I'm glad that we did this one quickly, because there are a lot of us who are grieving. We've suffered loss someplace, and certainly we don't have all the answers. We don't have all the answers, so we thank you again, Pastor Bell. You probably should have been at the place that you served tonight, but you chose to come to us, and we really want you to know that we appreciate that. Any words for the next?
Next Wednesday, we will come and it will be a breakout session.